Video 52, right at the very beginning. I did the same thing for Twilight Forest that I did with the Aether and that I did with Better Dungeons, though I planned it out to work a lot more like the Aether, and I think I worked the overall narrative a lot better in Twilight Forest, and I think I progressed a lot better. Better Dungeons, of course, was 9 videos long. I removed 4 of them, but that still left it with 5 videos of Better Dungeons. And the Aether, one of the longer running individual mods, was about 5 videos tops, and even then it still made a lot of changes. It made a lot of progress. The biggest fault of Better Dungeons is that it was the same thing for 9 videos, and I did nothing to further the progress and further the narrative. Kind of a running issue in this is me overcoming a lot of my own Let's Play isms. So I'll get into a groove just playing through a mod where I continue to just play through the mod, and I actually forget that I'm trying to tell a story. And a lot of the really bad parts of the entire Minecraft playthrough are where I just kind of started to stray more towards a Let's Play as opposed to a proper story. That said, Twilight Forest comes up next, and how I handled this one is how I handled a lot of previous mods. I made a new world, I made a portal to Twilight Forest, I mapped out a giant map, and one thing that was super helpful with Twilight Forest is you can actually make different kinds of maps, one of which shows you the individual biome and point of attraction of each biome. The whole world is actually divided up into something that's somewhat grid-based. And simply by mapping out this entire thing, I could real quick look at it and it would mark, hey, there's a jungle over here and there's a Naga in the middle. And that was super helpful. But I did that, and I mapped out 2 or 3 of those, trying to plot out a really nice progression. I know I wanted to show off the Naga, and I know I wanted to end with the Lich's fortress. I also wanted to pass through a couple different biomes. I wanted to pass through the really low forest biome. I wanted to see one of the ice biomes, but if I was going to keep this short, there's no way I could show off everything. So I took what I ended up with. Now by this point I was actually starting to think a lot ahead as to what I was going to do and how I was going to do it. I had this whole area prepped, I knew what I was going to do, I knew how I was going to handle it. I actually flew ahead. I ran across 2 of the Naga's battlefields, and I destroyed the Naga in one of them before we even started. I also modified the house that I'm in right now heavily, adding the whole extra wing with the enchantment table in it, and adding in this secondary crafting bench, though I didn't get the chance to show it off, and that saddens me a little bit. I did try to talk about what it was used for, though. And now I added the enchantment table here just because I had a whole lot of experience, and I kind of wanted to use it, but I wasn't given an opportunity. So I put the enchantment table in there personally, as well as a butt-ton of books, just so I could enchant a couple things. At this point, I was also thinking what I was going to do with the narrative and how I was going to progress with the narrative and take the narrative. I kind of pointed out that the sign maker was nearing us and that we needed to hurry. And this was then the grand finale. This is where everything drew to a close. So while planning out Twilight Forest, I was also planning out how I was going to end everything, how I was going to continue the narrative, how I was going to push the narrative, and what the story actually was, what was really going on. These are a lot of things that I didn't really think too much into. I'd gotten complacent in Better Dungeons, just going about doing a let's play, so to speak, instead of showing the proper story. But I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Not really much of this is seen until we get to the secondary end credits at the end of Twilight Forest. Video 52, 9 minutes, 50 seconds in. There were a couple skeleton spawners back there, and I was really hoping they would actually spawn a skeleton for us to look at. They're like regular skeletons, but I think they're wearing this Naga scale armor. I don't know if it helps them out in battle at all, but it looked neat, and I wanted to show it off. I couldn't just pretend that the spawners didn't exist, though, and leave them be waiting for something to spawn. Video 53, 3 minutes, 10 seconds in. I actually completely forgot that I was working that into the narrative as well. The whole idea that the changes that happened during the Better Dungeons mod actually seeped out through the Twilight Forest portal. So the source was in Twilight Forest. This actually helped me more rationalize the changes that happened during Better Dungeons. Like, there was a reason all this was here. It wasn't just me running around from dungeon to dungeon. It gave a reason behind it. It let me put closure to what I was talking about all through Better Dungeons. And it let me once again focus on the idea that we were drawing closer to the end. Video 53, 7 minutes in. I got more Naga scales for beating that boss. I knew full well that the Naga scales were there. In fact, in the previous video, the Naga scales were not in that chest. I added them in personally because I wanted to be able to make these two pieces of armor at some point, and I knew I probably wouldn't get enough to make both from just a single Naga. Video 53, 12 minutes in, when I find the rather large hill. There are actually areas buried underneath these hills that have a lot of ores, and if you go way down, there's actually a little maze way deep down underground. They're not too far down, though, and I really wanted to show it off, but I didn't want to have to cut anything out for time. I didn't want it to seem like I had to look that hard to find it. I need to keep moving, so it should have seemed more like I found it accidentally. Sadly, I dug and dug, and by the time I wasn't comfortable with how much time I was spending looking for it, I hadn't found it yet. A little bit longer than I probably would have. I will add, though, using the golden compass accidentally to teleport my way out was actually an accident. I did not know the golden compass would do that at all, and I was really genuinely surprised and kind of stumbling over myself when I figured it out. I had to think really quick on my feet and figure out how to do anything with the narrative at this point. Can I keep doing this at all? How do I keep acting from there? Truth be told, I think I would have liked to avoid using the golden compass, because the golden compass is a very important plot item. And for a very important plot item to suddenly have this special power felt really weird and out of place. Video 54, 7 minutes in, when I reach the Lich's castle. These castles don't actually have a proper entrance. I built this entrance myself just so it looked more like an entrance, like you could go in and it would look neat and everything. I even connected some of the halls together better, so it would look like kind of an entryway going in. I'm actually not terribly fond of how these are generated. There's not much of spectacular interest inside them, and it's largely just a bunch of small rooms extending out from the central tower. There isn't really even a proper entrance. You just have to carve your way in through the side. I explored the entire thing. I figured out any points of interest that I would need to look at. I built the whole entrance so you could go in and have something that looked neat in going in, and went from there. Video 54, 19 minutes in. The signs appearing in front of me. How I got these signs to appear in the first place was simply by putting them in there myself. I stared at a very specific point on the wall or on the floor, and I was careful to remember that point, so I could then go and place the sign down, then get back in position and stare at that point for the next, to resume recording. The crash and everything going negative for a moment really helped kind of hide any inconsistencies, but you can still see them if you pay attention. And that said, we get to the second bit of the end credits, and this is where I actually started dealing with what I was dealing with. By this point, I knew what I was doing. I knew how I was going to end the series, I knew how the overall story was going to go, I know how everything was going to go. And a lot of people give the Minecraft ending, the end credits, a lot of crap, but I took that and I ran with it. Now, a lot of people asked how I even, or a lot of people were curious, how I even made this end credit thing. And it actually had nothing to do with me editing Minecraft to put all of this in. I actually typed all this up by hand, and I grabbed all the different graphics and everything and made them all image files and dropped them all into Vegas Pro, and I edited everything together that way. Now, a lot of the end credits the second time around were kind of a rehash of the first, and the reason for that is because the two people know that I did not hear their message the first time. Since our friend was the first one to jump in the portal, he's the one who the message intercepted. And as I mentioned before, the closer he is to us, the harder it is for them to speak to me. What specifically all this means, I'll get into at the very end. Video 55, right at the very beginning. Going into Fate's Grasp, which a lot of people were wondering, what does that title even have to do with anything? And it all has to do with the concept of me being fated that this would happen, that that's unavoidable because it's my fate. And that's something that I slowly realize as the third season goes on. Up until now, I've maybe been a passing interest in the sign maker up until now. He would go off and do something else and leave me be. Or maybe he didn't have enough power at the time to properly control me, or the want to properly control me. When he finally found me again at the end of Twilight Forest, he was really curious. He was really interested in me and following me and knowing exactly what I was doing and observing me and seeing how I would react. And he wanted to make sure that I would continue to do this for him. So through all of Fate's Grasp, I am under the close, watchful eye of him to make sure that I stay his little entertainment toy. That said, Season 3 actually focuses on smaller mods, something that I couldn't work a narrative into, but could show off in a short period of time. At first, maybe through the first video or two, I went in full narrative, but it didn't take me long to once again fall into that same mistake, that same folly that I fell into before, essentially treating it all as just some kind of Let's Play series. The biggest thing, though, about Fate's Grasp, as I mentioned, is that the sign maker is right there. He is actively watching me and interacting with me now. He's not just floating back away, observing from afar, or maybe setting up an obstacle and leaving me go and he'll come back later. He is actively right there where I can speak to him. Admittedly, this isn't much different than even in Season 1, where the sign maker was friend and was sitting there right there watching me. One thing that I really wanted to do in Fate's Grasp, and this was a big mistake on my part to not do it, was to make it obvious that the sign maker was looking through our eyes. This isn't something that I would have wanted to be obvious at first, but it's something that I would have wanted to be obvious over time. And it would have made the next to last video make a lot more sense.
Waterproof pipes.
That said, actually, let me talk a little bit about the narrative. Let me talk about the story, and let me explain everything that's going on here. You see, our friend, the sign maker, is a very, very young child. And by very young child, I mean he's maybe 2 or 3 years old. I don't even know if I would say 3 years old. But by dream, when I mention the dream, I do not mean a literal dream.
So I guess I could
what I mean is the whole idea of that we're not perceiving reality for what it truly is. Right now, we're perceiving reality because this is how we choose to perceive reality. Because we can't quite understand how reality actually is and actually works. And as such, to someone who does completely understand all of reality, it would appear as though we are merely living in our own little dream worlds. This is the dream. Now, as we grow, we understand more about the world. We understand more about how the world works.
Steam engine.
And our perception of the world changes. Think back to what you thought the world was like when you were very young. It really doesn't make any kind of sense. It was a wondrous fantasy world. The world was very different from how you perceive it even now. And in a few years' time, it will be different once again from how you perceive it now. These are the dreams, and yet still, none of them come close to the dream of reality and being able to wake from the dream that is life to the much higher level dream of reality. Our friend is very, very young. About 2 years old, I would say. But at the same time, he has existed for a very, very long time. He's simply never woken from that very, very early dream. Instead of growing along with the world, he's still trapped in that dream world created by his 2-year-old mind. And the longer he existed in this world, the more he understood of how it worked. He grew, he just did not grow in maturity. And in understanding how the world worked, he eventually became like to a god. A lucid dream, if you will, despite this not being a true dream. He had such a deep understanding of the way the world worked, of the way all worlds worked, without truly understanding without truly understanding reality. As he lived in his own world for a very, very long time, he eventually found he was able to branch out and peek into other dreams, other worlds that people had created. And who's to say he didn't run across someone else's? Who's to say a lot of the interactions that we encountered, a lot of the builds and maps that he took me to weren't part of someone else's dream? But this essentially all came to when he found me, or more specifically, he found my world. In finding my world, I then shortly after found him, and of course this was a brand new world. He was essentially a god, but he didn't understand anything about how this world specifically worked. And so that's where I taught him how this new world worked. And he learned, and as he learned, he gained his godlike powers back. At first, he thought of me as a friend. He thought of me as someone who could be just like him. Someone who knew so much about the world and could teach him so much about the world. He looked up to me a great deal. And this then came to a close when I died to the Ender Dragon. It's not even so much that I died to the Ender Dragon, it's that I lost. I was imperfect. I was not like him. And in realizing that I was not a god like him, he instead viewed me just as he would anything else that is beneath him. I became a toy of his.
You know what? I'm just gonna...
And at first he didn't really understand how all of this was working. He was still learning. He was still changing the world, and I explored and ventured through it. But he eventually got bored of me and wandered off to do his own thing. I was still one of his toys, so he would still play with me on occasion. But it wasn't until he got tired of me, and like a child getting frustrated at a toy, smashing it against the wall, he attempted to kill me in escapecraft. And to see that I had actually come and survived past it, it's as though his own toy had done something terribly unexpected. And his interest was re-piqued, though I was still little more than a toy to him. So he went searching for me as I went exploring. As I went exploring, the two people from the end credits of Minecraft, two beings who do fully understand reality, were trying to prepare me, were trying to teach me more of the world and more of reality. So, in knowing and understanding more of reality, I could confront the sign maker and help him grow and understand more. He found me once again at the end of Twilight Forest, and I once again became his toy. This was expected to happen. In fact, the two people from the end credits led me directly into this. They knew it was coming. They had to just hope that I could deal with it and grow and persevere and succeed. So now, in Fate's grasp, having fallen back into the sign maker's hands, it's our only hope that by the end of this, before push comes to shove, before I fail completely, I know enough of the world, I know enough of reality to be able to not only save myself, but save the sign maker. 14 minutes, 5 to 10 seconds in, We're probably going to be going back, so you've probably seen this already in my large speech a moment ago. But I recorded about an hour's worth of footage on this and did some pretty heavy editing to take out the boring parts of it. But one thing that I actually messed up right back there, during that fade cut you saw me destroying part of it, was I wanted to put in a way for coal to get pumped back into the device to keep it running. And stupid me, I didn't realize until after the fact that I had actually pumped the coal into the wrong device. That's why it wasn't working. Video 55, right at the very end, I was actually a little concerned this wouldn't come across terribly obvious, so I'm really glad that a lot of people got that I was trying to just fake that I was going to go in and rest, so I could break out the back and take off running while his guard was down. So I'm actually really glad a lot of people figured that one out.